All right, today I want to talk about line clamping. So what is this and how does it work in CSS? There's actually a CSS property or collection of properties that we can use to get this effect. And how do we do this as a fallback in JavaScript? So first of all, what is it? Line clamping is the process where you take a whole bunch of text and you want to truncate it at some point. You can say, okay, I want to have 2 lines or 3 lines or 4 lines of text. At the end of that, show me an ellipsis. So it automatically truncates the text and gives you a better layout. So you can plan for how much content you want to reveal. And I'm sure you've seen this on many, many websites. Now, I did a video quite a while ago on how you could do this with a single line with some of the built-in properties. That link is up at the top there. This one is specifically dealing with multiple lines of content. And it comes down to this one property here. webkit-line-clamp. Now this is a prefixed CSS property, and it needs a couple of other properties to work with it, but it's actually got support across all the browsers. It was put forward as a proposal, and then all the browsers started supporting it shortly after it was introduced. So there's fairly wide support going back several years for this property. So let's take a look. Okay, and in my HTML, you can see there's a lot more text here than is actually being shown in the paragraph. And we're going to truncate this so that only 2 lines worth of text. Now, the amount of text that is revealed will depend on how much space is available. So I can adjust this, and we can see that even as I shrink and grow the size of my layout, I'm doing this responsively, it's going to show more and less text, but it still does the clamping and it still does the ellipsis. So this is the best approach. It's got great support, and in our CSS, let's go take a look at that. All we need to do is this little bit here at the bottom. We need to set display to WebKit box. The orientation needs to be set to vertical, so WebKit box orient, and we have to say how many lines we want to clamp. Now, it's always a good idea to do this as well. This will sort of kick in the effect. Okay, so those 4 lines of CSS, and you can copy and paste that. All you need to do is change this number to say how many lines you want. The rest of it stays the same anytime you want to do clamping. Okay, so that's simple enough, the CSS. The fallback is not something that you absolutely have to do. But I see a lot of people posting online and Stack Overflow and that kind of thing asking, how do I calculate the number of characters there are within certain lines of text? How do I calculate this? So I figured this was a good opportunity to talk about that as well. And we can use the process of calculating the size of my characters as part of a solution for this. So in those few browsers where we don't have it, we're able to check this. Okay. In my JavaScript, I'm going to be looking for the DOM content loaded event. This tells me the HTML has been loaded, so I can start looking at that. Now, there is a built-in CSS supports method. So this is an actual object in JavaScript. This is a method that belongs to that object. And you can check to see if the browser supports any CSS property. This was added at the same time as the @supports media method in CSS. So we're looking to see, does the browser support this thing? And you have to provide a value for it. So my variable up here, lines, I want 2 lines worth of text. So it tests to see if it can do this, if it can apply it to some element. If it can, it comes back true. Now, I've also added this little part here. So the double ampersand, I'm saying if it supports this and this comes back as true, then I'm going to write out these 2 messages, which is what we have right here. Now, I'm only adding this so that I can demonstrate this working with JavaScript, because I can't turn the feature off in the browser. So I'm checking to see, I'm saying, get computed style of my first paragraph inside the main element. So this first paragraph inside my main element, I'm going to find that element, pass that element to get computed style, and then I'm going to say right here at the end, I could just say, this, does that work? Yes, but it's not just the fact that I can call this method. What I want to do is, this gets me all of the CSS properties that are applied. So I am looking to see, does it have a webkit-line-clamp property? And is it set to the string none? So we get that. It's set to 2. So I'm saying, okay, as long as it's not set to none, which is what we get if we don't have this, then we get these things happening. So if I comment this out, there we go. All that's commented out. I've saved it. What's going to happen now is this is going to be true. The browser does support this CSS property. But when we look at the value for webkit-line-clamp, it's going to be none. So we'll come back here, refresh our page. Okay, a whole bunch of other stuff is happening. This is the other part of my script. So now what's happened here is this is actually our sort of best effort with JavaScript to simulate what the webkit-line-clamp is doing. So I'm going to walk you through how this script works now. So inside of here, if we've got this and webkit-line-clamp is set to something other than none, I'm just writing out those two messages. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call my own function for figuring out and trying to clamp that text. Here we have, at the very beginning, when this loads, this runs one time. Because remember, we are inside of the DOM content loaded event listener. So this bit of code is only going to run one time when the page first loads. I want to find out what is the line height on my first paragraph, or on each one of the paragraphs. It'll be the same for all of them. So I'm saving that in a global variable, which is up here at the top. My default value is 1. I'm going to go get the actual value that is being set in the paragraph and save that so I can reference it later. And I'm also going to take whatever the original text is here. So all of this original content, this is going to be saved inside the paragraph. What I'm doing with the script is I'm creating a property. I decided to call it data text. I could have called it data anything, but we're doing this. Not that, but we're putting all of this text inside of here. So that's what this line right here is doing. We're taking the original text and we're saving it so that we can reference it in the future. Because as we resize this, we have to recalculate the amount of text that is being shown. Okay. Then we'll call our method to actually do the clamping. And every time I resize the page, I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to loop through all the paragraphs and call clamp it on each one of the paragraphs. All right. The clamp it method itself. I want to explain the functionality and what it's doing. My methodology for going through and estimating the clamping that gets done to the CSS. The CSS does a much better job, but this is a good estimation. So step number 1, we need to find the average character width. And I guess I should put these in comments so I don't kill my script. So I need to know how big the characters are. And this is not the font size property. Like in the CSS, I do have a font size property set here. But this is the height of the character. It is not the width. And that's the problem with calculating the size. So we've got a height, but we need to calculate what the width is going to be. Once we have that, so we're going to look to see how many lines there are. We've asked for 2 lines. Well, we need to figure out how many characters can be held within 2 lines of text. And once we have that, then we're going to do the actual clamping. So we're truncating the original text. Now the different conditions, that's just the width of the paragraph, the font size, if the font size changes. So as the page is being adjusted, we're going to be recalculating this and redoing the clamping and adding the ellipse. So those are the main steps. Within each one of those steps, what we're going to be doing is so we want to take the total height of our element. So we're talking about the paragraph. We're going to use a built-in method to get the bounding box. The bounding box is going to give us, what's the X and Y position, the height, the width, all those things. We're going to take the height of the element, and we're going to use the height of the element and divide that by what the actual line height is. That's going to tell us this is the number of lines we have in our paragraph. Once we have that, we take the width of our paragraph, multiply that by the number of lines. So let's say there's 4 lines in our paragraph. I'll jump back to here. So right now we've got 2 lines of text. Let's say this whole thing is our paragraph. So I've got 6 lines of text. We'll say it's all filled in. 6 lines of text multiplied by the width of whatever this is. It's like I'm taking them all and I'm putting them all on one line. So what is the width of that whole thing? If I took all this text that's in the paragraph, put it on one line, what's its width? Once I know that width, now I can divide that total width by the number of actual characters there are. Now, it's not going to be an exact number, and like I was saying, this is an estimation. But if I take that total width and I divide it by the number of characters, so in here, if I added up the total number of characters that were inside my paragraph of text, if I put it all on one line, divide the width by that total number of characters, that's going to give me an average. It's the average number of characters. Sorry, the average width per character. And I do want to specify here that in the current text, not the original text, because every time we run this, it's based on, well, what do we got right now? What's showing right now? We're going to get an estimation based on that. Because we've changed the paragraph, we've resized it, we've changed the width, well, we're going to have a different average length. So the average length is going to vary a little bit each time we calculate this. And that's okay, because this is an estimation. Now, we want to know, okay, how many number of characters can be held in our case, 2 lines. I want 2 lines worth of text. Well, I have this average number. So if I take my element width and I multiply that by the number of lines I want, that's like creating a single line of text. So I'm saying, I'm creating 1 line of text. I'm going to figure out how long that 1 line is going to be. And then we take that total and divide it by our average. Now I know how many characters can fit. So we got that total number of lines that we had, we stretched them out end to end, figured out what that total width was, divided that by the number of characters, that gave us the average width of each one of the characters. Then we take the number of lines we want to have, multiply that by the width, and then divide that by our average character width. That tells us how many characters we can fit. Now we're ready to do the actual truncating. So, what are the different conditions under which we're going to truncate? One of them is, I've got enough room to begin with to put all of the text there. So that's one condition, enough room to hold all the original text. So we're going to show everything. Now, if we don't have enough room, so we calculated the size and we said, okay, we don't have enough room to show everything. Now, we're going to search for a space. So like a space like this, in between words. Is there a space character that comes after we've calculated how many characters we can hold. So we take the original text and we go to that point in the text and say, going forward from this point, can we find a space? If we can, great. Truncate it at the next space that we find, and then stick an ellipsis on the end there. And then our final condition, again, if there's not enough room, but what if we don't have a space? So if there is no space that comes after it, what we're going to do is we're just going to truncate it at that point. We'll step back a couple of characters and we'll add an ellipsis. Okay, so that's what we're doing, the sort of the steps that we're doing inside of this function. So we get the original text, figure out how many characters are in the original text, get the bounding client rectangle. This is the thing that's going to give us the width and the height. It'll give us X and Y and other things as well if we wanted those. But for right now, we want the width and height. Line count. How many lines can we display? So we're going to take, in the bounding box, we're going to get the height, divide it by the line height that we calculated. This was calculated back up at the very top here. We did the get computed style, found out the line height of the paragraph, and we saved it. So there we go. This is the line height from the CSS effectively. And that's going to give us the total number of lines that the paragraph is currently capable of displaying. If I take that and multiply the current number of lines by the width, that's going to give me that long horizontal line, as if all the text were in one single line. That's my total available width. And we divide that by the current number of characters. I'm going to round that off just to give me an integer, and this is the average character width. And if we look in our notes here, average character width, so it's 9 on this one, it's 10 right here, and if we scroll back through these, we'll get other values as well as we resize this. Average character width 13, average character width 11. So it will vary a little bit as you resize the page, as conditions change. And this is why I'm saying it's an estimate. So my average character width as the second line of text right here, because there's different gaps, these are going to change what the value is. Okay. Characters per line. So we divide the width, again, that we got from the bounding box, divide that by our average, and that tells us how many characters we can hold per line. Multiply that by the number of lines. That's the total number of characters that we're going to have. That's number 2 done. And then number 3, the actual truncating that we're going to do. So the truncating, if our total characters and the target characters. Target characters is how many we're allowed to have. Total is, back in the original text, how many characters were there. So here's that condition that we had right here, 3a, enough room to hold everything. We're just going to put the original text inside there. That's all you need to do. If there's enough room, just stick it in. If there isn't, so if there is not enough room, here's 3 B and C. So we're looking for a space. Now I just put a space in here. I could have done the Unicode character for it, but I just put a space. So I'm looking for a space starting at, I said 5 characters before whatever the target was. This is the total number of characters that'll fit in the 2 lines. So just to make sure that I've got enough space there, I could have used a different number. I could have said, okay, let's just go back 2 characters, or I could have started right at target chars, but I wanted to give myself a little bit of a buffer. So we're going to go back and say, all right, 5 characters back from the very end. If you can find a space beginning at that point, so index of is going to give me the index position of the next space that it finds starting at the end, or 5 characters before the end of our target. if we found it. So if it's greater than -1, if index of returns greater than -1, it means it did find a space. So that's where we're going to truncate. So I'm going to do a substring, and I'm going to start at position 0 of the original text, and I will go until the position where it found the space. That's my whole text from 0 up to that point, and then I'm going to add the ellipsis. This is a Unicode escape sequence, /u, and then the Unicode code point for an ellipsis. So I'm going to add the ellipsis on there at that point. If we did not find a space, then I'm just going to say, all right, go back 3 characters from our target, and we'll stick an ellipsis onto the end. From 0 to the target. Now, I don't have to do the subtract 3. Again, I'm just giving myself a little bit of a buffer. We could say 1, could say 2. Again, we're estimating here. We're trying to come up with something that's going to work in most conditions. Every once in a while, this is going to happen. You're going to have a few characters too many because we're dealing with an average width. And the average width is calculating on what it was just before we resized it, or as we're resizing it. So every once in a while, you'll see a little blip where there's that third line. And it's actually difficult to get to the point where you will get one showing up. This will work in almost all conditions. But you can play with the numbers and adjust this. Figuring out where you want to truncate it, how you want to calculate the average, play with those numbers a little bit. But this is our estimation. This is simulating what we would get from webkit-line-clamp. All right, so all the code that I have in here, along with those comments, that's linked to down in the description. If you play around with this, if you get this working really well and you want to share a solution for that clamping function with other people, feel free to post that down below. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. I answer as many as I have time for. And as always, thanks for watching.